After the release of 2002's Die Another Day, Pierce Brosnan's 4-film contract had been fulfilled. There was the possibility of a contract extension, but that never came to be. Part of the reason why this was down to the poor to critical response to Die Another Day, and the producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli opted for a new Bond. G. Wilson and Broccoli soon wanted to adapt the original Fleming Bond novel, Casino Royale. Due to complex rights issues, Eon did not own Casino Royale. Rather, Sony Pictures did through a deal Fleming made in the 1950s. This resulted in the 1954 Casino Royale TV adaptation. This meant Columbia Pictures, a subsidiary of Sony, struck a deal with Eon to be one of the co-producers and distributors on 4 Bond films, including this one. So the deal was made, and Casino Royale was finally being adapted by Eon Productions. Several actors were considered for the now vacant James Bond role. Sam Worthington and Dougray Scott were both considered, but ultimately it was Henry Cavill and Daniel Craig that were the producers, and director Martin Campbell were deciding between. Martin Campbell was keen to cast Cavill, but Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson thought he was too young. He was 22 at the time. As we all know, the actor cast was Daniel Craig. There was a lot of controversy over the decision to cast Craig, simply because he was below 6 foot tall and had blonde hair. Fair enough. Bond was traditionally a tall man with dark hair, but this film needed to be modern and fresh, and honestly, these complaints seem a bit trivial. Martin Campbell, who previously directed GoldenEye, returned to direct Casino Royale. Casino Royale is, for many people, one of the best Bond movies, and it certainly slots into the top 5. Casino Royale is a reboot, meaning any of the previous films have no bearing on the plot. This is a fresh new start for the series, and a reboot allowed the writers to be less restricted than previously. They didn't need to be concerned with the events in previous films. As a reboot, Casino Royale isn't a soulless money-grabbing opportunity. Instead, it feels like a movie made by people who genuinely understand the character and the series. The film is expertly edited and directed. Stuart Byard edited the film and clearly did an outstanding job, and this is apparent, particularly during the casino scenes where they are playing the poker game. There are good uses of fades and other ways of transitioning between scenes to convey the passage of time. It helps keep the pacing of the film up because, let's be honest, nobody really wants to watch the Casino Royale poker game in real time. Neil Purvis and Robert Wade have written or co-written every film since The World Is Not Enough, and they returned once again. They were joined by Paul Haggis, whose previous writing work I am not familiar with. The writing in this film is frankly brilliant. Bond as a character is expertly written, he's sharply written, and it harkens back nicely to those scenes of Bond investigating on his own, way back in Dr. No. It's hard to believe that Neil Purvis and Robert Wade also wrote Die Another Day, so as writers, not only can they improve, but also effectively adapt to the new tone. Pretty much every character is well written here. Not all of them are fleshed out, obviously, but even the small bit part roles are wonderfully realised on screen. Being a reboot, there was a lot of change afoot, not just behind the camera, but also in front. Q and Moneypenny are absent from the film. The first time since 1973 that Q has been absent, and the first time ever that Moneypenny's been absent. This doesn't have any effect on the story, and at no point am I wondering where Q and Moneypenny are. It's clear that the series can dispose of such characters and still work. Judi Dench was the only main cast member to return, and she's arguably never been better as M. The dynamic between M and Bond has always been pretty great, especially during the Connery and Brosnan years, but the dynamic is refreshed significantly when M is working alongside a reckless and inexperienced 007. Like many aspects of the film, it makes you reassess the Bond formula. Dench is fantastic in this film. In just a handful of scenes, she's on top form. Eva Green as Vesper Lynd makes for one of the best Bond girls. She's not a damsel in distress or anything like that. Vesper is a three-dimensional and multifaceted character in her own right. Eva Green's performance is fantastic, and probably the best from a Bond girl since Diana Rigg. Lynd is a very well-written character, like every other character in the film. Jeffrey Wright appears as Felix Leiter, and he's pretty good. His screen time is surprisingly limited, but for what we get of Leiter, he's rather good. Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre is one of the most compelling and interesting villains in the whole series. Le Chiffre is a man on the edge, he's desperate, he's stressed, and this makes him unpredictable and crucially a fascinating villain, and unlike any other Bond villain. There's no hollowed out volcano lair this time. Le Chiffre obviously isn't 100% realistic, but for a Bond villain he comes fairly close. Jesper Christensen is great in Mr. White, but he's far more prominent in the next film. Daniel Craig is fantastic in his debut as James Bond. His performance is incredibly watchable, and this, coupled with how Bond is written, makes Casino Royale a highly enjoyable viewing experience. Craig's interpretation as Bond is refreshing, but still feels like Bond. It harkens back to Dalton and to those early Connery outings. This Bond is a cold, ruthless assassin, perfectly adapting Fleming's character for the 21st century. Craig is great during the high-octane action sequences. He's great during the more intimate dialogue-driven scenes. He's just great throughout. This may stand as the single best James Bond debut. I cannot find a single fault, no matter how hard I try. Casino Royale brilliantly reinvented James Bond for the modern age. It's 14 years old at the time of writing and has aged very well. The over-reliance on gadgets and CGI so present in the last film are gone. Those aspects have been replaced by a truly masterful Bond film. It's not my favourite, but it's close. Casino Royale was a box office and critical success, surpassing expectations on the critical front at least. It grossed $594.2 million from a budget of $150 million. It was the fourth highest grossing film of 2006. Bond was back, and in a big way. Due to the success of Casino Royale, work started on the follow-up very quickly. Quantum of Solace was released on the 31st of October 2008 and was directed by Mark Forster. Quantum of Solace was the first ever sequel in the Bond series. It follows on directly from the events of Casino Royale. Previously, Bond films were generally standalone, barring a few references. Tomorrow Never Dies, for example, has nothing to do with GoldenEye. Quantum of Solace, however, is very reliant on Casino Royale for the basis of its plot. Quantum of Solace is a huge step down from the highs of Casino Royale. From the very start of the film, something feels off. The opening pre-title sequence, while we're on the subject, isn't half bad. The editing, however, is very choppy, and at times it can be hard to tell what exactly is going on. The sequence throws you straight into the deep end, but does make for an exciting, if somewhat messy start. The title song, Another Way to Die, is fairly dreadful. The vocals don't mesh well at all, although the instrumentals sound fairly good. The title sequence wasn't designed by Daniel Kleinman, who had designed every title sequence since GoldenEye. The title sequence was instead designed by MK12, and this sequence feels very un-Bondian. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels like a sequence for a totally different movie. Daniel Craig is once again on top form, as is Judi Dench. The two actors work really well alongside each other. The character of M is, however, a tad overused and appears in scenes in the field a tad too much. Jesper Christensen, who appeared in Casino Royale as Mr. White, appears once again. His screen time is fairly minimal in the grand scope of things, but compared to Casino Royale, he's in it a lot more. Christensen is fantastic as Mr. White. I wish he was the main villain. He's just utterly fantastic on screen. Nefeyu Amalek, I may be mispronouncing that, as Dominic Green makes for a rather underwhelming villain. Amalek is pretty good, but Dominic Green as a character is just quite dull. His plan is quite interesting and could have been expanded upon, but this film is less than 2 hours, so we end up getting very little of that. Green himself doesn't get enough screen time and unfortunately ranks as one of the weakest villains, but the way Bond disposes of him is cold and perfectly appropriate to this Craig era. Felix Leiter, as played by Jeffrey Wright, returns once again. He doesn't appear very much alongside Bond, but perhaps this gives us a greater insight into Leiter's work away from MI6. Jeffrey Wright is great, just like he was in Casino Royale. Roy Kinnear makes his first appearance as Bill Tanner, M's chief of staff. Kinnear is pretty great in the role. He seemed fairly down to earth and relatable. Quantum of Solace doesn't feature Q or Moneypenny, so Tanner appearing starts to give audiences a slight glimpse of the classic MI6 team of old. Quantum of Solace is most certainly one of the weaker Bond outings. In many places, the editing is all over the place. The runtime is too short. Being less than 2 hours means there just isn't enough time to fully get to know the characters, especially the new ones. At times, the film does feel rushed, especially those first 20 minutes or so, where the pacing is cranked up to 11. As a follow-up to Casino Royale, Quantum works reasonably well. It continues the storyline well and doesn't do a disservice to what was achieved there. However, Quantum feels a tad forgettable, only being remembered because of its strong ties to a far better film. Quantum of Solace, despite its mixed reviews, was a financial success, grossing $589 million from a budget of $200 million. Skyfall was released on the 23rd of October 2012 and was the first of 2 Bond films to be directed by Sam Mendes. Skyfall is one of the absolute best Bond films. It succeeds in so many ways. Firstly, the cast. Daniel Craig gives possibly his best performance so far as James Bond. He has totally settled into the role. Judi Dench is equally fantastic as M in what was her best performance in the series. While Judi Dench made a cameo appearance in Spectre, this film marked Judi Dench's final proper appearance, and it's fittingly Dench's best performance in the series. Javier Bardem as Raul Silva or Diego Rodriguez makes for a rather bonkers villain. Silva is certainly one of the more unhinged Bond villains, and Bardem plays this perfectly. After a rather dull villain in the previous film, here we are gifted with a complex and fascinating villain, rivaling the very best in the series. Let us not forget that Silva also succeeded in his plan, though he never lived to find out. Ralph Fiennes as Gareth Mallory and the future M is great. His on-screen dynamic with Dench and Craig works really well, and Mallory comes across as a really interesting character. With only slight glimpses given, this makes him all the more intriguing. Skyfall marked the return of series regulars Q and Moneypenny. Ben Whishaw is great as Q, brilliantly reinventing the role for the modern age. Naomi Harris is great as Eve, effectively serving as one of the Bond girls. Rewatching this film with the knowledge that Eve is Moneypenny doesn't ruin the experience at all. Albert Finney as Kincaid is such a fun character with some truly memorable lines. Basically, the cast of Skyfall is very much on point and a foot is not put wrong. Skyfall is very well paced. It's not exactly a short film, and yet the time just whizzes past. It's one of the most engaging Bond films. This is helped by the performances and the script. The visuals must also be praised. Sam Mendes has a great eye, and unlike in the last outing, we have no trouble telling what's going on. Roger Deakins was the cinematographer and did an outstanding job. Some of the shots in this film are top notch. Skyfall has to be one of the best looking Bond films. It's hard to choose between Casino Royale and Skyfall, but for me, Skyfall just about edges it. Skyfall is also my favourite outing in the entire series, though there are several ones that are almost there. Skyfall is modern, telling us that Bond is just as relevant now as he was way back in 1962. Skyfall marks 50 years of Bond fantastically, not that that is the main focus. The film works well on its own merits, outside the anniversary excitement. Skyfall was a financial smash hit, surpassing all expectations. It grossed $1.1 billion, far more than any preceding Bond film. All this from a budget of no more than around $200 million, not much more than the last film. Spectre was released on the 26th of October 2015 and Sam Mendes returned to direct. When I first saw Spectre, I thoroughly enjoyed it and considered it to be nearly as good or equally as good as Skyfall. This was in the first weeks of its release, and over the past nearly 5 years, my opinion has changed on the film. To be blunt, Spectre isn't a great Bond film. It doesn't work very well at all on rewatches. The pacing is certainly clunky, with the third act in particular being poorly written. Spectre is only a few minutes longer than Skyfall and yet feels like a chore to sit through. I think Spectre lacks momentum in its action sequences. Either there's a lack of genuine peril, such as in the Rome car chase, or for some other reason. It feels a bit lethargic. Spectre isn't a total write-off, however. The cinematography, as done by Hoyt van Hoytman, maybe mispronouncing it, is utterly fantastic. Some of the shots in this film are a sight to behold, but the script is seriously lacking. Having Bond go rogue again feels all too familiar at this stage, and the scenes set in London dealing with Nine Eyes grind the pacing to a halt. The performances in a Bond film are mostly good, but this time perhaps not. Daniel Craig is great as James Bond, but this may be his weakest performance in the part to date. In several scenes, Craig appears bored, disinterested, or just lacking in the energy and charisma that was guaranteed in his previous outings. It's not like Sean Connery in You Only Live Twice, but it's still a step down from what we expect from Craig. Christoph Waltz made for fantastic casting as Franz Oberhauser when it was announced. It was great that such a talented and prolific actor was joining the cast of a Bond film, but unfortunately, Waltz just isn't that great. His turn as Oberhauser, or should I say Blofeld, is underwhelming to say the least. He's one of the more softer spoken villains, but the intensity is never even slightly notched up a gear, and it makes for a rather flat screen presence. Oberhauser being revealed as Blofeld was fairly poor, but Blofeld having been Bond's foster brother for a time is really poor, and the fact that that's Blofeld's entire motivation behind his criminal empire is incredibly poor writing. It just feels like something one would expect in an Austin Powers movie. It's just bad. It's as simple as that. Spectre really does feel like a movie struggling to keep up its momentum. Pacing is rarely, if ever, a problem in a Bond film, but here, especially on repeat viewings, it's a chore to sit through. The script feels like it's still in its first draft, and the action sequences feel undercooked and dull. Spectre's obsession with being linked with previous, and let's be honest, better Bond films is another issue. The films should stand on their own merits. If it has to link all the previous Craig films together, do it properly and without undermining the plots of the likes of Casino Royale and Skyfall. Spectre isn't totally dreadful, but it is without question one of the weakest Bond films. Spectre was, however, a financial success. It grossed $880.7 million from a budget of around $250 million. It didn't make as much as Skyfall, but it showed there was still very much an appetite for 007 adventures. At time of writing, No Time to Die has yet to be released, so what conclusion can we draw from the Daniel Craig era so far? Well, until No Time to Die has been released, not much. But so far, it's certainly been a mixed bag. 2 great Bond films and 2 rubbish ones. 50-50 split. So No Time to Die will determine whether the Craig era has been a good one or not. But until then, thank you. Thank you for watching these retrospectives and stay tuned for more.